Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Mentor Monday. Mentor Monday is your weekly microdose of encouragement, inspiration, and miracle grow on your potential as a coach. What we always love to do is to connect with you. So do us a huge favor. Make sure that you jump in. I'm just making sure that our communications are right. Yeah, it looks like we're all good. Hey, jump in on the chat and tell us hello. Tell us where you're joining us from. Tell us something that you're excited about, that you feel life and momentum on. I'm excited about starting off this new series, and always important to hear from you guys. And let me say this on the front end. I really need your interactivity today because you're going to help us actually unpack this series as we do it over the next few weeks. Tamara from Atlanta, Georgia, welcome. Lynn is joining us from San Diego. Welcome, Lynn. Anybody else? Patrick from Greeley, Colorado, welcome. Anybody else would like to say hello? Just tell us where you're joining us from, what you're excited about, what you feel life and momentum on in your life right now. Love to always connect. And again, what we're going to do today, as soon as we start, part of today is I'm really going to need the interactivity from you, because what you're going to do is you're going to give us some of the things that we're going to be unpacking over the next few weeks. So interactivity is going to be really important for us, more than probably some other weeks. Do us a huge favor as well. If you're finding these Mentor Mondays to be helpful for you, do me a huge favor and like this, even like right now. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, like it right now, comment or share it. That tells YouTube and Facebook that we're doing a good job, and it makes it more available for other people. There's Judith, who is joining us from Atlanta as well. Atlanta's in the house. Awesome. Penny is joining us from San Francisco. Feeling life around the holidays coming up. I'm excited about the holidays as well. Anybody else like to say hello really quickly? Again, tell us where you're joining us from and maybe what you're excited about this week as we are beginning. Anyone else? All right. Well, you know what? I know some of you are not excited about this topic. I understand. I'm like many of you who are kind of like over the whole COVID thing. Like, if you never hear that word again, if you never see a mask again, if you never have to wash your hands again. I mean, it's almost to that extreme that it's kind of been life. It's kind of been like this song that's on repeat every day. It's pretty much like Groundhog Day. For those of you who saw that amazing movie with Bill Murray back in the day, it's kind of like, okay, is this thing ever going to end? Because how did everything start? Everything pretty much started like, hey, wash your hands and keep your grandma safe. It was kind of where everything started. And then it was kind of like, hey, everybody's not going to work for 2 weeks. Enjoy your Netflix subscription, and then we'll come back. And, it was all that. And now it's like, what? It's a year and a half. It's more than a year and a half later. And everybody's kind of in different varying places of it, depending on where you live in the country. I mean, just by who is on here today, I would definitely say that Penny's experience in San Francisco is different than some of you who are living in Atlanta, right? I live in California as well. But where I live in California is actually a different experience than what somebody in San Francisco or LA is actually experiencing. We're all experiencing something different in many cases, but at the exact same time that we are all experiencing really a common experience of this phenomenon that has happened. And I don't really want to, like, for me, I'm not really interested in talking about it. I'm kind of like over it. I'm not interested in reading about it or any of those other kinds of things. But the reality is that we have a world right now that we are experiencing people on an everyday basis. And you guys can throw this in the chat if you're experiencing the same thing as me. But are you experiencing the same thing that I am? Let me say hello to a couple of people. Pakistan is in the house, and also Chicago with Diedrich. Thank you for joining. Are you guys experiencing the same thing that I am? That you literally go into places, maybe places of business, maybe the workplace that you have, maybe various organizations or whatever, and you notice this funk that's still in the air, even though a lot of people have gone back to work and a lot of these other kinds of things, that you're going back into these places and you're still feeling a funk in the atmosphere. Are you still hearing people say, on a daily basis. Well, before COVID, before COVID hit, before the pandemic, if you're hearing those things, I want you to understand, because one of the things that I teach in advanced skills training and also in our boot camp is this before and after kind of phenomenon. When people can actually look at defining moments in their life, when something changed, when there was a before and after, when people are talking about that, it's really a hot button. It's actually something that's really important that's going on in their life. But I would say this, that most people are kind of like, well, I'll give you an example. I was reading, and this is a crazy example, all right? So it's an extreme example, but I was reading this story, basically a biography of this particular gentleman. He's still alive. He's probably like in his 50s or whatever, lives in the United States now, but he grew up in a small village in Africa. And they had all of these Civil War kinds of things that were going on there and everything else. And he left that village, but then he wanted to go back and help people. So he literally had to go with like an army caravan, avoiding mines, to get back to the village that he used to live in. And when he did that, they had a minesweeper going in front of them. But the problem was that the minesweeper didn't do a great job. And so someone kind of slightly veered off the path. And what ended up happening is that there was this major explosion in the van that he was in. And not just a van. I mean, it was like a major, I mean, it was more like a lot of people in the back and inside. Like there was probably like 30 or 40 people on this particular vehicle. The vehicle explodes. And the next thing you know is that guy, when he came to, he was in a ball on the road, and all he saw were pieces of the people who were in the vehicle with him. And what happens, and fortunately for him, I mean, he didn't know what happened. He was stunned for quite a bit of time, where there was such a trauma, there was such a happening, that it was almost like he was seeing all these other people who were experiencing like the turmoil and everything else, and they were kind of like the living dead. It's kind of like they're going on, but you could see that there was almost there was like a lack of life that was on them. There was almost like a going through the motions. Here's what I think. I think there's a lot of places that are obviously have been hit much worse in the United States than COVID. But the reality is that everybody who has experienced this pandemic in the United States, to a large degree, there are people walking around that are kind of like the living dead. Like they are alive, but they're not thriving anymore. That if you ask the vast majority of people, when I say vast majority, I'm saying if you ask probably today, and just try this today, talk to 85% of the people that you know and say, tell me what your 5-year plan is for your life. Tell me what your 1-year plan is for your life. I would, in some cases, I'd say a lot of people don't have a 5-year plan, but what I would say is that the vast majority of those people will mention something about COVID and their inability to even think about the future, plan for the future, that there is a lack of certainty that's actually existing in their life right now, and that they have a hard time moving forward. Now, here's the thing. That's where most people are right now. It's why we need to talk about this. And I'm actually going to give a handful of weeks to this particular series, because I think that there are some particular points that we have got to go after as coaches to help people move on during this time, because it's everywhere. I'll give you an example. So I always have gotten to be at the table with various leaders and everything else. I was at a table of leaders just weeks ago, and we went down the line, and people were just talking about what was the challenge in their organization and what was the struggle, and what person after person said, leader after leader said, is that people who have come back do not have any kind of motivation. They're not committed like they were before, and they don't seem to have any goals or passion. They just kind of just seem to be like showing up, kind of going through the motions. There was actually 2 leaders that were in this group of people that I was incredibly wowed by their vulnerability, but also shocked at the same time. 2 of those leaders in the last year who have been contemplating suicide because of everything that's happened around their organizations and around their leadership. And all of these guys pretty much said in unison, we have no idea what we need to be doing. We're racking our brains. And here's the people who are leading the people who are going there. So I would argue that it's kind of all over the place. I've been to churches over the last few months. I'm not naming names, and I'm not in, but they were very different places. And I've been in there and I'm thinking, wow, if I'm walking in here with all these religious people and they're people of faith, I'm expecting that there's going to be a lot of expectation and hope in the air. And you know what I found in all those places? Some of the most oppressive environments where people it's like what they're going through the motions. They're kind of done. They're kind of like at their end. And I'm like, man, if this can happen with people of faith who believe that there's a God who's actually for them and is actually supporting them and actually helping them, but they don't have any hope, we're really kind of in a crisis of hope right now. So this is why we need to talk about it, because you know what's happening for a lot of coaches? Because I watch what coaches are doing on their Instagrams, and one of the things that I will tell you on the front end, I do not like being problem focused. Matter of fact, as far as coaches are concerned, we are not problem focused like a counselor or a therapist would be. We're not sitting around trying to diagnose things and all that other stuff. That's not really what our job is. What we do have to do, because at the exact same time that we are not problem focused, is that we have to understand that as coaches, one of the things that I always tell our coaches is that when you choose a niche, if you're going to sell coaching, you can't sell coaching. You have to sell solutions, and you have to be associated with a problem. The problem is that I hear a lot of coaches, well, if I'm quite honest, is that there's a lot of coaches out there. If you actually looked at their Instagram or anything that's going on out there, they're not really talking about anything particularly serious. Or what I would say is that the problem that I see probably more often is that there is this fine line. Let me see if I can actually get a color here. That would be helpful. There is a line that I would say between being on the negative, while at the same time there on the other side of the spectrum is being so like pie in the sky that you're not really in reality anymore. Listen, if everything's amazing, if everybody's life's incredible, if no one has anything that's going on in their life, you have nothing to sell, you have nothing to offer, right? Because when people come to you, it's because they have a problem, they have a challenge that's in their life, they have a barrier that's in the way, and they choose you because they believe that you have a solution to it. So we need to be specific about what those things are. And so sometimes you'll go on coaches' Instagrams and you'll think, what world is this person living on? Like, are they even connected to reality at all? Do they have a pulse on anything that's going on? Are they going to talk about anything that's going on in my life? Because sometimes coaches are talking about stuff that's just kind of like, okay, that's probably right now in my life not in the top 50 of my priorities. That's what I see a lot of that's out there on Instagram. Perfect. Everything looks perfect. And you know what? What this last year and a half has taught us is that not everything is perfect. Matter of fact, the coaches who are still trying to create Instagrams that make everything look perfect are not getting any traction there because it's not reality. People want to see people in their pajamas, not wearing makeup, a lot of other things. That's what people would really like to see, because that's actually been the reality for so many people. Is like, hey, can I see the real? Can I see someone who truly has an understanding that's really in touch, is speaking the same language of what I am actually experiencing? Give me some language for this thing. And so we have some coaches who are living in this area of pie in the sky, and then we have some that are living in this area of negativity, where it's just like everything that you see is trauma, trauma, trauma. And you know what? We can't live there either. We've got to somehow live in this transition point right here, is what I would really call it, of how do we actually acknowledge the elephant that is in the room? Can we actually acknowledge what everybody is experiencing? What I would say, not necessarily just everybody, but for you in your niche, what are they experiencing? What are their fears? What are their thoughts? What are their emotions? All of this other stuff. Can we actually acknowledge that these things are going on, but that we have a pivot point to move them towards something that looks different than right now? Because the reality is this: the reality between negative and pie in the sky is that we have got to move. That's what we're really talking about. We cannot stay where we are anymore. We cannot stay. Now, the reality is that some of the people who have had stuff come up in the last year is because they've already had bad habits in their life that led up to this point, and now it suddenly got nuclear when they had to be around their family a lot more because they've been neglecting different areas in their life. They've been neglecting different areas in their own life of their own personal development, their own character, some of the things that they put off, and it really came to a head in the last year. That's what's true for some people. Some people have had habits that have been bad for so long that all of a sudden, when you add COVID to the mix, and now like their social media habit is now being fueled by COVID and conspiracy and political stuff and everything else, it's actually contributed to a really, really bad problem for them right now. And so what we've got to do is that we've got to listen. I understand this. We can't go back to where we were before. We don't really have that opportunity anymore. I mean, there's some people who are holding out a hope and some of those other kinds of things, but the reality is that world before, who we were before, does not exist anymore. And there are some people who are just sitting around holding on hope, possibly. And when you look in the rearview mirror for so long, you actually letting go of the wheel. You actually can't make any real progress in your life. This is going to be true for people who have lost their jobs, who need to change their careers, who need to go back to school, who need to move somewhere else, and all of those other kinds of things where they've had friend groups change, all kinds of different things. Some people who have actually lost people, like people have died during this time, have got to be able to move on. But I don't think that people know how to move on. First of all, because I believe that some coaches aren't even talking about it. I mean, some people are talking about it generally speaking, but most of the stuff that people are talking about with COVID is all about statistics, and it's all fear and a lot of those other kinds of things. Where it comes down is when somebody wakes up in the morning and they feel that funk in the air, or they go into a workplace and there is that funk in the air. They go to their church and it feels powerless and stale and stagnant, and they feel that funk in the air. What are you supposed to do about that? Where's the funk coming from? And what do I do about it? Well, there's three things that as we're unpacking things over the next few weeks, this is how we're going to be talking about how to coach the COVID funk, because we need to get the funk out, right? That wasn't meant to be a pun, but that just is what it is. Two is that we've got to give them a language for what they're experiencing. See, because a lot of times people have a feeling, but they're not really sure of what they're actually feeling. All I know is this, and so the feeling might be anger, it might be resentment, it might be depression, it might be a lot of other kinds of things. What's true, though, is that the feeling is pointing to something else. Like sometimes people are just trying to diagnose, like this is the way that we do diagnosis. Well, I just feel like sad all the time and I'm unmotivated. And somebody might say, oh, it sounds like you're depressed, so you need to take this medication for it. Well, what we're doing is that we're talking about what something feels like, not what is actually causing the feeling. See, the cause of the feeling, the root cause of the feeling is actually what we need to go for, because if we fix the root cause, then we change the emotion that is present with how we see whatever is going on right here. One of my daughter had come to me here recently, and she was talking about a friend who in this past year and a half has gotten really into psychology and has gotten really into a lot of stuff. And every time she has a symptom with something, she's not sleeping well, these different kinds of things, she's always looking for a clinical definition for something to fix whatever is going on. Except my daughter, who is going through the same, because I will say, teenagers probably are lacking a lot of the tools and a lot of the resiliency of things that we had when we were growing up. But my daughter is able to step outside of herself and say, man, I don't like the way that I'm feeling. So that actually means that I've got to change my habits. It means that I've got to do different kinds of things to have a different outcome. It means that I've got to change the lens by which how I see myself and how I see this circumstance. And so she'd come to me here in the last week and she's like, man, I'm just like so frustrated with this person because all they want to do is look for a clinical definition or a clinical reason for why they feel like they feel and maybe find a medication for it, as opposed to looking at their life and how they're thinking and how they're acting and how their habits are forming something and everything else. I'm thankful that my 17-year-old daughter thinks like this, because I realize that a lot of people don't. And so what we've got to do is that what we have to understand is that something like depression is not necessarily a chemical imbalance. You know that you can have depression because you know that there's a calling and there's a purpose on your life and you know what it is, but you're not doing it. You know that you can have depression when you believe that there is something that is meaningful and purposeful out in the world, but you don't actually know what that is for you, can create depression. There's all of these different things that if we know, we give people language to what they are feeling, now we can actually go after what is the root, which leads us to this, is that really the third part of it is that we've got to give them tools to do something about it, because that's what's really lacking for people. How do you move from point A to point B? We don't move from point A to point B just talking about our feelings and just simply acknowledging them. It means that there's got to be new discipline in our life. I think that the average human being is very undisciplined in their mind. I was talking to my wife this weekend, and yesterday it's an unusual weather pattern that we're having in California. Like, we're literally having our summer in the last week and a half. Like, it was 80s all week this week. It's bizarre. It's happening in November. Now, we normally do get a late summer, which usually hits like September or October where we live and everything else, but it's just like November, and it's just like, boy, this is like kind of strange, but we're going to enjoy it. So one of the beaches that we were able to actually drive out on the beach, we'll take our 4x4 SUV out onto the beach, and we've got a pass, and we're just sitting out there. And I'm like, I was looking at some of the things that have come up, some stuff that I had read from some people that we're connected to and everything else. And I remember telling my wife, I was like, telling her about some of the things, and I'm like, I'm so thankful for the life that we live, but is our life that much different than everybody else? Or is it just simply how we look at life is different from some other people? And I would argue that, not that we've done this perfectly over the last year and a half, because I've had my own frustrations. I've had my own disappointments. We've had our own, like, boy, this is so obnoxious. This is so annoying, or whatever, and all of that other stuff. I would argue that the way that and this is the interesting thing, going back to that book that I read of this guy who had experienced extraordinary trauma. Like, I could do just story after story of stuff that should probably make somebody not be able to function in their everyday life, in terms of the carnage and different things that he had grown up experiencing and seeing and everything else. That this guy is marked, his life is literally marked by joy. That's one of the things that people say about him more in his life than anything else, is that he is able to go to some of the most desperate places in the world and help people because of the joy that he actually carries. I'd say that you have to see things really differently. You have to have a different kind of habit. You have to have a very different discipline, because he doesn't just go there because he's saturated with guilt or brokenness or hurt and he's wanting to help people. He's going there as a whole person, joyful in the middle of people who are in the most dire, desperate situations of malnourishment and just gnarly things that most of us will never see, thankfully, with our own physical eyes in front of it. That I believe that we have this choice about life, but I believe that most people are unprepared, and that COVID has exposed a lot of people. It's exposed what people really think about what people really believe and how undisciplined that we are in our life. So here's what we're going to do over the next couple of weeks, okay? What we're going to do is that we're going to unpack some of these key areas. Now, here's what I would love for you guys to do. If you guys have a key area that you would like us to really unpack and to go after, then throw that in the comments and I will look at it. But here's some of the things that we're going to unpack over the next few Mentor Mondays in terms of key areas that I've been really seeing. One of those is being really lack of motivation, that so many people are experiencing this thing of a lack of motivation. What do we do about it? How do we talk about it as an issue? How do we talk about it and give people a language for it and then offer a solution for those things, because there's a reason why there's a lack of motivation that's actually happening in someone's life. What we hear so common right now, that there's a lack of clarity, that there is no vision for the future. These are huge kinds of things. How do we talk about it? How do we give people the tools to help them move forward in it? Here's another one. Another one is just anger. Where is it coming from? Because a lot of people are looking for objects of being angry, whether it means politicians or whatever, or businesses or whatever. People are looking for that. But that's actually just the overflow of it. What is really going on, and what is the source that's actually triggering that, and how do we help them? We have to confront the fact that a lot of people have dealt with grief and loss. And grief and loss has not just been that people died. That is a legitimate, very hard source of grief and loss. But grief and loss and marriages and children and moving and friends and jobs and career and all of these different things. Or I would just say that grief and loss of what you thought the future was going to be. You know, I've known some people that were who had a plan to retire and had those kinds of things that were put off in the middle of all of this stuff. You know, who could prepare for these things? And so these are things that we actually have to talk about, because a lot of times people are feeling things, but they don't really know why. We don't want to just talk about symptoms. We want to actually get to the root cause and talk about those things to help people. Transition, which is extraordinarily hard for people. How do you move from one career to the next? How do you move from one place to the next? The reality is that we're all in transition. And I had a mentor who told me you should always be in transition, because it means that you're actually developing and growing. Transition, there's an opportunity right now to become people that we couldn't have become before. But there are some people who are so tied to the past and grieving the past that they can't actually move on. How do we actually talk about these things and help people move on? Here's a couple of other ones. Disappointment. Obviously, it's a big one. One of these really key ones that we're going to go after, especially for people, and I would say that it's not just a feeling in the United States, but I think that it's a feeling in a lot of different countries, where people are like, I just feel like I can't do anything about it. What am I going to do about this? I'm only one person. You'll hear people say these things. Matter of fact, if you listen to what anybody has said in their complaints, any of their things that you've heard over the past year and a half, you've probably heard every one of these things. Or what you could say is, I can hear when they're saying this, that it's actually what they're really talking about is that they have no vision for the future. There's no goal that's there. This anger that they're spewing is actually connected to something bigger. The anger of whatever that looks like. What are they truly angry about? When we can start talking about the problems, then people can start associating us with the solution. And we've got to get real. You know, we're going to spend probably the next 3 to 6 weeks, depending on how many topics that you guys give me. And I'm going to look at even the comments right now and just read some of those things really quickly as we are on here. Let's see what we've got here. People have used COVID as a clutch to not be progressive in life. Or a crutch. Yeah, it's definitely possible. I think that probably for me, the average person wants to be able to move forward, but they don't really know how. And so sometimes what ends up happening is that the victim not responsible, powerless thing is one of those things that ends up coming up. And you know, for some people, that's definitely a crutch. And I think for some people, it's definitely something that they probably believe. Thank you so much, Albert. You are so welcome, Andrew. Thank you. Let me speak to this really quickly. Difference between situational versus medical psychological depression diagnosis. And Perfect Finds for You said, can be a medical clinical illness due to biochemical imbalance. You've not been a part of my advanced skills training. So let me tell you what new modern science has taught us about the brain. Thoughts actually create chemicals in your body. Chemical imbalances, many of them that are diagnosed. Now, I'm not saying that there are not some that are literally physical issues that are going on in someone's body or with an organ, with a gland or something like that, because we definitely know that. You know that with like the thyroid, that if it's not functioning correctly, that it can actually cause other problems. What I will tell every one of you, and this is what we know, and this is according to a lot of the new understanding that we know about the body, like from Eric Kandel, who has taught us so much about the DNA and how we switch on and off DNA based on what we think. Some of you, I want you to research it today. How does thinking actually cause different chemicals to flow in the body? That there are a lot of things that are diagnosed as chemical imbalances, but they're not chemical imbalances because it is a physical issue. Is that the thought precedes the chemical. And that's one of the things that when it comes to depression and a lot of other kinds of things that is often misdiagnosed in people's lives, is that, hey, you know what? If you really, because here's the reality, is that there are some things, sometimes people don't even know what's most important to them in their life anymore. But when you have not lived into what is most important and what you value most, the result's always going to be depression. It's always going to be resentment. It's always going to be anger. It's always going to be a lot of these other kinds of things that kind of spill over. But if you treat the emotion rather than actually treating the source, then we're going to have problems. And so that's my pushback on that. And I would encourage every one of you to research how do thoughts actually cause chemical imbalances. Start doing the research on it. I would look at Carolyn Leaf, Eric Kandel, some of those people, and they'll actually talk in great detail about how things actually flow preceding things. And it actually creates a cycle where the thought creates the feeling, but then the feeling creates an action, but then they also overlap over one another, because now it creates more feeling and it actually affects your DNA. It literally changes your DNA. It makes you susceptible to disease. So hopefully that's helpful. Andrew says stress is a single mother. Clinging to a food instead of exercise is a way to handle stress. Patrick says fear and lack of trust. Penny says relationships. That's a really good one. We'll do that. Let's see. Laziness. Lynn says, I can't wait to dig into this. I hope it's great. Andrea says, thoughts create chemicals in the brain. Amazing. I had a hunch this would be scientifically proven. Absolutely. I'm a psychotherapist. Part of depression and other mental health diagnoses are genetic. It gets passed through generations. Absolutely. And here's the thing. Let me tell you what the new science is. Thoughts can actually turn on DNA and turn off DNA. I'm going to push you to actually research this. Thoughts, we cannot change our number of chromosomes. We can change the genetic expression in our DNA. Case in point is that I've watched my wife do it, who had generations of certain kinds of things happening in her life, and actually certain physical conditions that were passed on that are not a part of her life anymore and are actually not present within our children as well. So if we go after these things, you literally have inside of your DNA, the perfect instructions it can be tapped back into for people to fully live healthy and also not to live in genetic predispositions. We can change those things and the thinking and going after those things, because we can rewire our brains. You can literally change how your brain's functioning, but it does take work. And it does take some disciplines, and it does take some tools to be able to do that. Encourage you again, read some Carolyn Leaf. Also read some Eric Kandel, who is a Nobel Prize winner, on his research and all this, because it's fairly new scientific research that I would say has probably happened really over the last 10 to 20 years. But we've got to change some of the model and the way that we're diagnosing things, because I'm literally watching teenagers now that don't know how to deal with this stuff get doped up with so much medication and everything. And it's like, there's got to be a better way. And so that's what I'm actually experiencing and watching with the kids who are around us, where we're living. COVID policy has been so polarizing that people have less trust in each other. Absolutely, I believe that. Let's see. We have lots of loss in agriculture during COVID. Interesting. Eric Candle, I'll actually stick his name in there. I'm hoping that I spell his name properly. Eric Candle. There we go. How does it say host? That's weird. So it's automatically trying to link to something. So I have no idea what Facebook is doing, at least on the Facebook end, to try to link something. But anyway, yeah. So check those people out. Awesome. Well, listen, I appreciate you guys all immensely. I hope you get pumped up and you get really excited about talking about something that, in some respects, I would say that I'd much rather talk about a million other things than COVID. But we are in the place where we are, and there's a lot of people who need extraordinary help and support during the season. And we've got to be able to step up and do it. And we've got to get real. Like, we've got to be real people who are talking about what's truly going on and offer tools to enable people to move on in their life, take steps, and to move beyond and actually design the kind of life that they want to live. We don't have to live as victims, and we don't have to live just stuck where we are right now. There's actually a hope for a future. And I believe that if we can go after some of these things, and again, we're going to unpack them over the next handful of weeks of how we go after some of these specific issues, feel free to comment or email me if there's any other particular topics that you want us to go after during this time. We're more than happy to be able to do that. Well, listen, I appreciate you guys all immensely. Have a great rest of your week and take care. Oh, wait, I forgot something. I did forget something. Let me do this really quick. Duh. I almost forgot. There it is. December 3rd through 5th. Forgive me. I completely forgot about even talking about this because I was, so excited and into what we're doing. Boot camp, our next boot camp is going to be December 3rd through the 5th. It's a full weekend that goes way beyond the life coach certification course in terms of what we're teaching. What we're covering during that week is what is coaching, the 4 lenses of a first-class coach, steps of a coaching session, building a coaching framework that gets results, focused, effective coaching that cuts out the fluff, how to help your clients maintain motivation, 2 models of coaching, core skills and characteristics for breakthrough coaching, best practices for ethical coaching, how to ask powerful questions, how to build coaching relationships that last, and what to include in a coaching agreement. Yes, it is live. Our life coach certification course is not, but these weekends are live. It's expanded training that isn't offered in our current life coach training course. Live Q&As at the end of each one of these sessions, live coaching practice demos, and replays for the next 90 days. So if you guys have not gotten trained and certified as a coach, there's a link inside of the description today where you got a couple of different options. One is that if you enroll in Jumpstart, Bootcamp is actually a part of Jumpstart. And so you can, as a separate course, and so you can just enroll in Jumpstart for $97 a month with a 3-month minimum commitment. And you can get all of the steps to building a coaching practice, get trained and certified, get a lot of branding and marketing help and all of those other things. Or you could just do boot camp for 1 weekend, which is $247. Again, that link is inside the description, goes directly over to Jumpstart. But you can click around in our website and you can enroll in boot camp. It's going to be the last boot camp of the year. We thought that possibly September would be the last one, but we were able to sneak 1 weekend in December to make this happen. So I would encourage you to get enrolled as soon as possible. All right, everyone. Well, I'm going to really go now. All right. Listen, I appreciate you guys all immensely. Have a great rest of your week and take care.